Let's start with what we just witnessed, Chuck. Alex Pereira, Jiri Prochazka. In my opinion, very easy first round to score, although I did see a couple people give it to Jiri. To me, it was all Alex, especially due to the leg kicks. Felt like completely chopped down those legs, and Jiri was having a lot of trouble, kept switching stances, didn't seem stable on his feet, and Alex seemed very, very calm out there. In just his second 205 fight in the UFC. The face-off, by the way, when they were announcing them as they were both standing
Oh
there in
my
the
God,
cage,
that was
the way the UFC shot it over Yuri's shoulder and you see Alex over there, I mean, it was just epic, stoic stuff. It was beautiful stuff. It was just amazing. The intensity was just fantastic. And then in the second round, like I said, Alex finishes one Jiri Prochazka. I do believe it was a little bit premature. Upon watching it live, I was like, a little bit surprising. Waited for the replay before I tweeted anything. Watched the replay. Definitely feel like it was a little bit
Wow.
premature. Feels like it should have breathed just a little bit more. Your thoughts on the fight, and then of course the finish, Chuck.
Well, first of all, man, that was one of the most epic stare downs. And remember, we were talking about going into this. You were talking about Jiri and just what an intense fellow he was, and I was like, that's kind of crazy to say that somebody could out aura Alex Pereira. And then you see them do that, and you're like, dude, this is too much. This is crazy. I mean, they're both death staring each other, and neither one of them is even for a second taking their eyes off each other. I mean, you already had a main card where they'd set the table so brilliantly. You had four different, knockouts going into this fight, which to us felt like it should go down that way as well. To get that stare down, then get the fight that we got, pretty crazy. I don't know how Madison Square Garden always kind of delivers this wackiness, but it seems to. I really thought that it played out very similar to how we thought it might, which was that at some point Jiri would come in a little, maybe not sloppy, but he'd come in aggressively, and he was kind of throwing a big looping shot, and that's where he got nicked, he got hurt, dropped, and then that's where the trouble began. I thought that it could go like that. And you know what's really crazy is I predicted that I just threw it out there as a joke. I said second round, 3 minute and 38-second mark. Remember, I like
Yeah,
very
that is
specific.
crazy. Yes.
It was that close to being exact.
408. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It wasn't so far away. But I think that it kind of went that way. But I was surprised, I guess. I thought it was fairly masterful by Pereira, but I didn't think he'd be that poised. It just seemed like he was just so, like he was not sweating it. He'd been in this building before. This is his house, man. Madison Square Garden is where he performs. And it just seemed like he was going to slowly dismantle this berserker that he was respecting, but he was timing his shots, and it played out that way. Really good stuff. I thought it was a good performance by both guys, but especially Alex. That was just, I think that showed what he's capable of in this division, man.
Conspicuous by its absence in that response is your thoughts on the stoppage.
Oh, I mean, I watched it in real time. Like, in real time, I thought it was early. And as you said, as they showed the replay, the only thing I was wondering is, like, you could see Jiri get a little limp for a second. Looked like he might have went out. And then, but you see clearly he didn't. And I hate that kind of thing because I think that'll be a big focal point as we leave it. It leaves it untidy because if you're trying to move the division into a different, all of a sudden, we're talking about the next fight for him, and you're like, well, you hate having asterisks, but I did think it was early. I mean, they should. I can see why he might have jumped in at that moment, but man, you got to give it a couple more seconds there because he was never just splayed out with his hands out or anything. He kind of went limp for a second, but you can see that he's not out. So it sucks that it kind of ended that way.
PT.
The stoppage, you're both wrong on that. Jiri said afterwards that he was out, therefore he was out. Mark Goddard saved him from himself.
Did he say that? I didn't get a chance to catch that.
So I mean,
okay.
Ariel
waited
for the replay. I waited to hear the man out, and I'm telling the world now,
he's a total mensch.
Like,
come on. Before, okay, fair enough. He did say that. The quote was, "In the end, I think it was right. I was out." So fair enough. I'm not going to bang the drum on this, but when you watch
then Troy, cut
live,
this out. Let me do my take again. No,
PT, when you watch that live, did you think it was?
Yeah,
I
was call? Like, that's that. I thought it was early. Yeah, it didn't look like a classic knockout situation. So obviously, I'm like waiting. I want to see the replay as well. I didn't really know based on what I saw in the replay. Of course, it's a title fight, so you always expect them to go that bit longer, right? Like that's what we always think. But if Jiri's saying he's out, I mean, I don't think you say that unless you're out, right? Like you're not like
Yeah.
I know he's a lovely guy, but if he was genuinely like in the midst of an exchange there and he didn't go out, he'd say, "Look, I thought I could have went a bit longer." He doesn't have to say, "Look, Mark Goddard's a disgrace," but like he could say, "I thought I had a bit more in the tank there," or something like that. I think that's enough clarification.
Wow.
It's a tough call. Toughest job in sports is being an MMA referee. Mark Goddard at the very top, maybe the best referee in the game right now. But I just thought it was a smidge too early, and I thought that
Mhm.
Yuri deserved it. But again, he's not complaining, so let's not make a big thing about
True.
it. Alex looked fantastic out there. Excuse me. Landed 12 of 15 leg strikes. That was a big part of the game plan, clearly. And continues to look great at MSG. 3-0 at MSG now. Of course, last year. I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing what this guy has done. And I think the fight kind of went, as you said, Chuck, like a lot of people thought it would go, that he's just the more technical and crisp striker. Yuri did have some moments. Like he
Mhm.
landed one lead uppercut that just broke through there. And I was like, oh shit, Yuri,
I know.
hadn't been active for a year and a half. There's a part of me that wishes we got a little bit more out of those two because they're just so fun to watch in there. But uh, it's a new era. It's the Alex Pereira era.
It's actually the Alex Pereira. I like that. It's actually really genius what Pereira did because when we're thinking about this matchup in terms of striking, it was always going to be like wild, long distance, unpredictable stuff that Yuri would have success with. And by chopping out that leg, you're immediately kind of
Mhm.
ruling out those things because obviously you're going to be using your leg as a pivot. You're going to be exploding off your leg. And as soon as he chopped that down, he's forcing Yuri to come in and play in the pocket with him. And ultimately, that was his downfall, right? Like every time he went in, and you knew Yuri knew he was playing with fire because you could see how much he was fainting. He was doing wild, herky-jerky movements to try and throw Pereira off, but it was just a matter of time. Genius game plan from
And
Alex
Pereira
Pereira.
was absolutely not loading up. It was almost like a lot of it was just short stuff, kind of like hinting like threats.
Touching
But
him.
then some of the stuff he's throwing was not really, he wasn't putting a ton of mustard on it. He was just trying to be precise and kind of time something out. And obviously he caught him coming in, and that spelled the end of the fight. But I thought that I thought his poise was really, that's what stood out to me, man. I mean, they had that intense stare down. It's another, it's a piece of history that's been done to win another belt, to be a two-time champion, two different weight classes. But you never know how they're going to come out, especially in a guy like this. And I just felt like he handled himself very well. And both him and Aspinall going against two of the scariest guys you could possibly face in the division, right? And they both navigated themselves very well in this. But it's really fun to see a guy like this break through, because I think when you get new blood like that and he's a killer like that and he's kind of got that demeanor, you feel like it's this untapped thing. You don't know exactly how far he can take it, but it does add some wild imagination to the division and who will have to go through him in the next fight and all that stuff. I love when it refreshes like this.
And right after he won, I was like, all right, so what do they do now? Where do they go from here? Because again, Jamal Hill tore his Achilles in July. Most people aren't coming back for a year when you tear your Achilles. So are we now not going to see? And that's like you come back and then you might need a training camp after that. So are we just not going to see Alex Pereira defend this title for 8, 9, 10 months? Interestingly enough, he had a name on his mind, and it kind of came full circle afterwards because there was once a time when Alex Pereira was this kickboxing guy, and the answer to a trivia question like, who's this guy in kickboxing that once knocked out Israel Adesanya
Right.
and beat him via decision? Izzy was, let's be honest, very dismissive of him and said that he's, probably at some bar and, maybe I'll give him an opportunity if he wins a few fights. So in the post fight interview, alongside his head coach Plinio Cruz, he said, "Well, there's a guy out there who isn't fighting right now. Let me give him an
Man.
opportunity. Come to daddy. Let me fight you at 205," which I thought was brilliant stuff because if you look at the landscape at 205 right now, if Jamal Hill isn't there, and he should be the guy who fights for the belt if he is ready to go, but if he's not there, and Alex wants to stay active, and I don't think Izzy is coming back anytime soon as well. But you just look at the rest of the people, like Rakic is fighting Jan, and we suspect Johnny Walker is going to fight Magomed. There's not a great option. There's nothing bigger than an
True.
Izzy fight for him. So I thought that was kind of brilliant on his part to try
I know
to
we just got
drum
through.
that up.
It's so complicated because we just got through saying like Izzy needs to take some time off, man. He needs to go through this stuff. Now he enters the forefront again. I think it's pretty cool that Alex is actually calling that out. I know that that's his loss and all that, and they've got this rivalry, but it's almost like he understands the rivalry, and I still feel like he just kind of wants to just remove him from like, like I said this before, like
From existence?
yeah, from existence, but sort of, but in the sense of like, it's always been Adesanya's story, but now you're starting to see this story kind of overshadow the other one. I feel like he always wanted to hit it to turn into his story. You know what I mean? And I think that's an extenuation of that. Like, that's where he's at.
Alex Pereira, just the 9th fighter in UFC history to win a title in 2 different weight classes. Certainly no one has ever done it in just 11 pro fights, and certainly no one has ever done it in 2 different sports. Kickboxing, he was just named as the latest inductee into the very prestigious Glory Kickboxing Hall of Fame, and you'd have to think that he is a surefire UFC Hall of Famer after doing what he did tonight, which is, again, just nothing short of amazing considering how few fights he's had in the UFC. And oh, by the way, wins over the likes of Sean Strickland, who's the current middleweight champion, wins over the likes of Israel Adesanya, Jan Blachowicz, Jiri Prochazka, in just 7 UFC fights. Like, those are 4 of them. It's truly one of the most remarkable runs in UFC history.